But my question is: so is Bernie the man who brings this to the table, or is Bernie the man who carries it across the finish line this time?
Well, that's a great question. There are a lot of people who really feel like Bernie Sanders should run for president again, and they really want him to. And, he hasn't really said what he wants to do.
I'll tell you one thing. He is working harder today than anybody else.
There's no energy deficit there.
None at
He will
all.
be turning 79 in the next election year, though.
Yeah, but how old are you?
I am 84.
See, that's what I'm saying.
I'm
And look how good you look at your age.
I'm 36.
Look how good you
I'm
look at
36.
84.
Well, no, I mean, look. Regardless, I don't think it. I actually don't think it. I actually don't think it completely matters. I mean, I do think. I mean, we have. There's going to be a hard slog ahead until 2020. There's a lot of Democrats who want to run. There's a lot of conversations to be had. We still have very difficult conversations to have about so-called identity politics that some Democrats don't want to talk about. Many Democrats do. A lot of other issues that we have to talk about in the Democratic Party. It'll take a long time to get to when it comes to that primary. However, I do think that when it comes to this particular issue of health care and Medicare for all, this has become a much easier to explain concept that it does seem to be, whether or not he's the guy that sort of signs the bill in the end. Obviously, the impact of it is sort of growing, as spreading around that someone like Kamala Harris, who definitely wants to take that kind of mainstream Democratic mantle as well as the progressive mantle in the 2020 election, is going to put herself on the list for that.
But you didn't answer the question, which is if Bernie is Bernie the nominee or the candidate? John, is he?
He can be, but the answer to the question is the Democratic Party will nominate the person who most effectively, in the eyes of the great mass of Democrats, who most effectively communicates that they can not only beat Donald Trump if he is still president, or to beat President Pence or whatever, but also who can really provide an alternative, can make this a different governance. And so somebody who's running soft, somebody who's running centrist, will be rejected. Right off the bat, that puts Bernie in a much stronger position than a lot of contenders. Doesn't make him the only one, but it puts him in a stronger position. But I've talked to him about it, and I'm not talking out of school. He has said that he's not going to go launch anything until after next year because he's running for re-election in Vermont. And one thing, if you know Bernie Sanders, there's a reason why he's such a successful political figure in Vermont. It's because he puts Vermont first. He takes it seriously. And so the conversation is not complete in any sense until after November of 2018.
Yeah.
At that point, I think there will be an assessment, but it's going to be one much like his assessment in 2014 and 15. And you remember, he took a year to figure out how to do it. And so I think people who are rushing this thing make a mistake. Could he be the nominee? Yes. Will he choose to be the nominee? That's up in the air. Does someone like him have to be the nominee? Absolutely, because the nominee has to be somebody who is not simply resisting, that's essential, but who is also projecting, who's going forward.
Who would you say is like the most like him of the people that we talk about now?
I think I just pulled my mic.
Oh, no, you just,
there you go.
you're
who's most like him?
Yeah.
Well, certainly Jeff Merkley.
Okay.
And Merkley, I think some people think Merkley might be considering a possible run if Sanders doesn't. Certainly Merkley's done a better job than most senators of connecting his resistance on the floor of the Senate with movements outside. I would also suggest to you that there are people who are not in the Senate, and we seem to be very much locked into the Senate as who's going to run and who's a possible. There's some mayors around the country who potentially could jump up and jump into that position because mayors have been so effective at opposing Trump on climate change, sanctuary, things like that. So a mayor like mayor of L.A., right? I'm not saying he is exactly like Bernie. You don't have to be the irascible guy from Vermont, right?
Sure.
But you have to communicate that if you are the president of the United States, not if you're the nominee, because that's not how people think. If you are the president of the United States, you A, replace Trump and Trumpism, but B, you want to have as visionary a presidency as a Franklin Roosevelt, or at least a John Kennedy.
You did not mention Elizabeth Warren.
She could be, and I'm sorry I didn't because she's acquitted herself well and she's a potential candidate. She's not a kid either.
No.
And so people
younger than Bernie.
People are well, younger than this guy, right? And so people are wrestling with that question of should it be a young person. And one of the things I will suggest to you is John Kennedy was not a perfect president in many ways. But the genius of John Kennedy's campaign, and the very difficult campaign of 1960, which many people thought he wasn't supposed to win, was that he projected a sense of where you would go in the future. It wasn't just replacing somebody and beating a party that was in, moving to the right. And so I would love to see somebody under 50. And frankly, I will not casually, I will not be casual about mentioning the names of members of Congress, of the House, like Mark Pocan, an openly gay man. Keith Ellison, first Muslim in Congress. We've put so many people outside the range of who we might see as a possible presidential candidate. I'd like to bring some of them in, and I don't mind a 5-way primary, by the way.
We're going to need to hold the debate in like the Staples Center.
No.
Just fill it with the stage is going to have 5 rows on it.
No, I've said that already several times. I think this year the Democrats are going to have the JV debate and the varsity
They
debate.
better not. They better not, because Reince Priebus's incompetent management of the process and anti-democratic management of the process actually fostered Trump and Trumpism.
By the way, I've got to say on the age thing, I think Bernie buried the age issue in his last campaign.
I don't mean that I don't mean that to get.
As an 84-year-old,
all the candidates were old in the last last election,
especially Bobby Jindal.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean the main between Hillary and Bernie and Trump. So I don't mean to say that specifically a thing. I'm just saying it's a factor that you would have to consider. I mean that's old.
All right. Now I'm gonna.
I'm sorry. Okay. Apologies.
All right.